Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Care.com's webinar series. We've been bringing you webinars on a range of topics impacting caregivers in the workforce, from flexibility strategies and how to address senior care issues with employees. Care.com provides a solution for employers and employees to support working caregivers and reduce the costs associated with poor productivity, absenteeism, stress, and overall work-life management. So we are invested in these topics and feel strongly about championing the progress of work-life efforts. My name is Justin McCovery, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we begin, I just want to cover a few basics. You can listen to the webinar either through your audio speakers or via the teleconference line. If you have any technical issues at any moment, please feel free to contact me, your moderator, via the questions function. You can also feel free to submit any of your questions at any time via that same questions function. We will address all questions at the end, but feel free to submit that at any time. You can also live tweet with us today via Twitter using the hashtag HR, which you can see up on your screen. So we encourage you to do that and tweet with us. And then I will now that brings me to our topic for today, which is special needs care in the modern workforce. Did you know that 30% of parents caring for a child with special needs end up quitting their job as a result? It's important to understand how these statistics affect organizations. They may or may not be equipped to support their employees who have special needs family members. During our seminar, we'll discuss the following: putting special needs into context, discussing the prevalence of special needs disorders and the impact on workplace productivity. A global phenomenon with local solutions. Finding great special needs care is not easy, so we'll discuss some of those resources with you. And from context to action. So 79% of people think employers should play a role in providing assistance to employees who care for a child or an adult with special needs. So what can you do to do that? We'll discuss that a little bit today. Our speaker today is Rochelle Serwinski. And she started her unique caregiving journey about 20 years ago when her son Nicholas was born with significant special needs. He was nonverbal and needed assistance in everything from feeding, walking, to personal care. Undaunted, she traveled with him to Africa, Italy, China, Egypt, and Russia. And she had to find homes, schools, therapists, and much more in that process. She learned 5 different languages in order to communicate with the people who helped care for her son. And since 2005, she's lived in Vancouver in Canada, where she's been actively involved in the special needs community and the community at large. She is now our Community Relations Manager for Care.com, working with our Care with Care product in Canada. So I'll now turn it over to Rochelle. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here with you today and go over this growing phenomenon that can really affect companies worldwide. And so our topic today is special needs in the workforce. So I'm hoping to be able to cover this in about half an hour, and then we will follow with questions and answers. So the special needs in numbers, as I said, this is really a growing phenomenon. 10 to 15% of the general population has a disability. And that means it's about 34 million people in Canada and the US only. We're not talking worldwide. Those are the numbers in North America only. What does this also mean is that approximately 15% of a firm's workforce has a disability, 15%, or has a dependent with special needs. As Justin said before, 30% of parents caring for a special needs child are forced to quit work altogether. So later in the presentation, we will have a look at how does that impact a company and their human resources. Let's continue on the special needs in number. At 19.3%, the special needs population in the US exceeds the largest minority group, which is Hispanic. 73% of businesses report that their employees with disabilities do not require accommodation. So that means that really, if a company has an employee who has a disability, most of the time, in 73% of cases, those employees do not require any specific accommodation. If they do require accommodation, whether it's a wheelchair access or maybe flexible working hours, the cost of accommodation is less than $500 per employee and often comes at no cost. It just requires a little bit of creativity and flexibility. But I will talk in more detail about this later. More about the special needs in number. Did you know that 1 in 88 children is born with autism? And 79% of people think that employers should play a role in assisting employees who care for a child or an adult with special needs. In turn, providing adequate support will help retaining the best employees and in the long run will be beneficial to companies. Companies need to think of the cost of retraining employees. Those employees can be loyal employees, devoted employees, but because they have special needs or some disabilities themselves, or they are caring for a family member who has special needs, all these really have an impact on their productivity, unless the companies decide to really be supportive in that. So this is the context. So let's talk about the actions a company can take. How do we create a supportive workplace? Creating a supportive workplace includes information about community resources. This can include finding the right caregiver from a reliable source. I wish I had this when we were living abroad. I remember I had constant fights with my husband about the lack of information his company would give us that we could use to help our family. And so as Justin mentioned, we were living abroad with an international organization, and we have this really severely disabled child, and I had to deal with moving to a new place. I had to deal with settling down, and I can honestly say, in hindsight, that if I had the proper resources to find a caregiver, that would have made a huge difference in my quality of life, in our family's quality of life, really, not just mine, because it was a stressful situation, of course. From context to action, information about workplace benefits and how they can be used to meet the family's needs is very important, and just as important to have supportive supervisors and managers. For example, with the United Nations, which is the international organization we worked for, there were provisions about a special education grant that could start before age 6 if the circumstances justify it. Now, we didn't know about this special education grant that was available. My husband didn't know. He was a staff member, and so I almost had to threaten divorce before he would go and visit the human resources manager and ask whether there were any special provisions for families who care for a child with special needs. So then that person looked into our file, and sure enough, there was. And I think when we started benefiting from those special provisions, our son Nicholas was, I think he was over 6, but I still get mad when I think of all the hardship we would have avoided if we had known of those special provisions in time. More about creating a supportive workplace. This would include job accommodation for the employee who has a disability. I can think of universal design, for example, white door for easy access to wheelchair, easy access programs for computers. The neat thing about universal design is that it's actually better for everybody, not just for people with disabilities. So you can, for example, think of those sidewalk curbs for strollers and wheelchairs. But it's also good for people with walkers. It's good when you have difficulty walking. And as I said, universal design, which can be applied to offices, to houses, to public spaces, to restaurants, just make our everyday life more accessible for everybody. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really passionate about this issue, is that I truly believe a world that is open and accessible and accepting to people with special needs is actually a world that is more open and more accessible and more accepting to every one of us. The other idea about creating a supportive workplace would also include understanding more about the disability. An HR manager could maybe, if she finds out while protecting the employee's privacy, if she finds out that he or she is caring for someone with Down syndrome or epilepsy or autism or diabetes, I think it will be really helpful if they learn more about it, because that will help the communication between that employee and themselves, and communicating issues and problems. So the disability can be physical. For example, the employee uses a wheelchair to move around. He or she needs a wider door or wider space at the desk in order to move around, to turn the wheelchair around. Another example is people with diabetes. They may need to go to the washroom often. Now, this can be seen as a form of absenteeism if the employer doesn't know about the condition. Other ideas to create a supportive workplace would include flexibility in work hours or scheduling, the possibility maybe to work from home, either part-time or full-time with maybe some visits to the office, and effective job accommodation. For example, a staff member who has a disability may be most productive outside the 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. regular working hours. And HR professionals can accommodate that as long as the office obviously does not suffer from it. Likewise, a staff member who cares for someone with a disability, for example, a child, may be able to work less hours during the week due to medical appointments, school meetings, etc., but can work on weekends when the other spouse is around. Other ideas now about job accommodation. Job accommodation for the employee who cares for someone with disability. As I think I mentioned before, flexible schedules can be very helpful. Maybe a time bank system when they can work more at certain days and less on other days. Understanding more about the disability in order to accommodate for that. Supportive colleagues and supervisors, and as mentioned before, useful information made easily available to the employee or to colleagues of the employee. HR professionals may consider having a meeting with direct colleagues and supervisors and explain the reasons behind job accommodations. Sometimes when a staff member requires job accommodation, unless the reasons are explained to colleagues and supervisors, it may create some misunderstanding, like some colleagues may wonder, like why he or she got to have that. And so that's why it's really important that HR people have these meetings. Hello?
Rochelle, you're still there. Are you okay?
Yeah, okay. And if a staff member, for example, if a staff member suffers from depression or postpartum disorder or some other long-term illness, HR people can also urge colleagues and supervisors to be patient and not take things personally, like mood swings or outbursts or etc. Again, I cannot stress enough the importance of information, because when people are informed, they tend to take better decisions. Now, let us touch about the global phenomenon regarding special needs and how we can find local solutions. Here's some facts. Family members provide the bulk of disability-related support for everyday activities. Fact number 2, families provide an essential bridge to the realization of citizenship in the daily lives of children, youth, and adults with disabilities. Fact number 3, women are more likely than men to be involved in providing care on a daily basis. More about local solutions to this global phenomenon. For employees who care for a family member with disability, finding skilled and reliable care for work-life balance is very, very important. If I can talk about this, as I said before, when we were living abroad, this to me was the first thing that really would make a difference in my life. Whether I had good, reliable care or not, that's what made my stay in any given country good or bad. In addition to that, one also needs to combine government support with privately paid support if possible, because as we all know, a government cannot and will not totally support a family when they care for someone with special needs. Another local solution to be added is to add informal supports, and those are also called unpaid supports. They are community-based supports like faith-based organizations such as churches, synagogues, mosques, community centers, your neighbors, other family members, etc. Now let's talk about a really important issue. How do you maintain a healthy work-life balance when caring for a child with special needs, and when that care puts exceptional demands on your time and energy? A company can have very devoted employees, long-time employees, but left without support, these employees often have to quit their jobs or reduce their working hours. As mentioned before, the statistic is that 30% of parents who care for someone with disabilities have to quit their jobs. And so those are 30% less good employees for any given employee, any given company, and that company will have to hire somebody new, retrain that person, and the cost of doing that would probably be half as much or 3 times less as accommodating the needs of that loyal, long-term, devoted employee that you already have working in your company. Global phenomenon, local solutions, a little bit more about the employee who has to take care of a dependent or a family member. And I would say to pay attention to their own needs, whether physical or emotional. Physical needs would be good nutrition, enough sleep, regular exercise. Sometimes some company can accommodate that. Some companies are big enough that they have an exercise room, or maybe the employee can have stretch breaks, every couple of hours and not sit at his desk or her desk for long hours at a time. And again, this is good for everybody, not just for employees who have to pay special attention to remain in good health. What about emotional needs? Some of the important parts here is about relationships. Nurture your marriage or that special relationship you have in your life. Make and keep friends, as it is really important to not just work and family. It is so important to have someone to talk to, someone to share everyday problems. And then just as important is really pay attention to have fun in your life, whether this be once a week or 15 minutes a day or, an afternoon on a Sunday, or you just have to make it intentional because it is really important. Relationships, I'd like to speak more about relationships because studies have shown that it's not money that makes our life the best it is. It's not the big house, it's not the latest gadget, it's not, the Porsche in your garage. It's really your relationships with people who matter to you, whether it be your spouse, your children, your parents-in-law. In fact, the quality of our life relies very much and is directly proportional to the quality of our relationships, whether it be at home or at work. So more about local solutions to this global phenomenon. As I said before, finding reliable, skilled, caring help is really important. You can see here, this is a picture of our son Nicholas with one of our helpers in Cairo, Egypt. Abir, this is not a real name, she was recommended to me by another expat. She did not have a degree in child psychology. She spoke very little English. I had to learn Arabic for her in order to communicate with her. But she was a very honest, patient, and caring mother. She raised 3 good kids, and I wanted her to introduce me to her kids. And so that's how I hired her. I did not have an agency. I wish I had one. I was kind of left to find for myself and for Nicholas to find this support. And Abir proved to be a valuable helper for our son. She loved him. She saw him as her own child, and she stayed with us for the 5 years of our stay in Egypt till we left Egypt to go to Russia. And looking back, I don't think I would have accepted to have the life I had for 20 years unless I had like a real strategy. Like I think I would have put down my conditions to my husband, and I would have told him I'm not going until we organize the caregiver issue. I'm not going to this new place until I know I'm going to have someone skilled and reliable with references. And so I think if I had to go back, that's what I would request. But as my mother-in-law would say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you better and stronger. And so here I am. Okay, our next slide. For the employee, how do you remain productive at work? I think it's important to communicate your needs to your HR person. It's important to schedule regular breaks as required, whether it be stretching breaks, whether it be, I don't know, for someone with diabetes, washroom breaks, or just go outside the office for a breath of fresh air maybe. And the third thing I would mention is knowing your limits. If you really cannot work 9 to 5 and you don't push yourself, be open about it. Maybe you can work 4 hours at an office desk, and maybe the next 4 hours you need to do something different. I would say be open about your needs, as it is important for communicating those needs and finding the right solution that will work for the employee and for the company. Next slide. I would like to come back to the benefits of a supportive work environment. What are the benefits of a supportive work environment? Obviously, there will be more job satisfaction for the employee. For the company, they will retain committed and loyal employees. Those employees, if they are in a supportive work environment, will have a genuine desire to see their company succeed. And they are also more likely to stay for the long term. So again, for the company, the benefit is to retain those valuable employees. For me, I think because most of us spend 1/3 of our time at work, I think our work environment really becomes our second family. And it's the work environment, your office becomes your second home. And I think it only makes sense that we all try our best to have the best environment possible at work, because then everybody benefits. The company benefits, the employee benefits, and the whole community benefits. So our next slide will talk more about the local solution for companies. For companies, it is less costly to accommodate a skilled, devoted employee than to train or to replace this employee with a new one. For companies, becoming partners in care provides long-term benefits. Next slide. How do we embrace the change? Because with the statistics I have given you throughout the presentation, you can see that special needs in the workforce are here to stay and will probably become even more prevalent as we, come up with other long-term illnesses or long-term disabilities. And so more and more now, I think it's important, rather than fighting the change or struggling with it, I think it's much better to embrace the change and see what are the benefits that embracing the change will bring to us. As we embrace the change, our language changes. Now, we don't talk so much about disabilities. In Canada, for example, we more and more talk about diverse abilities or diversely able people instead of disabled people. And we even coined a new word that is diversability. And so we would say this person has diversability rather than he has disabilities. Similar to the population of women and people of color 50 years ago, I like to think of today's special needs population as that special group that is making progress inside the community towards full acceptance in social and economic circles. They have moved, people with disabilities have moved from welfare recipients to becoming colleagues, and even further, they also have become customers. They have created new markets. Companies are creating new products for them. You know, there is a new niche about coming up with devices to see better, to walk better. And so, as I said, this is such a significant change when you look at 50 years ago, where people with disabilities were invisible to the workforce. And now they are there. As we mentioned, 15% of the workforce nowadays will be composed of people with disabilities or people with diverse abilities. All these changes make for a better and more caring society. So how do we embrace change in the workplace? So as I mentioned before, inclusive and diverse workplaces provide for better working environment. And a better working environment provides for better productivity. So just imagine a workplace made out exclusively of men. Just close your eyes and think about it. Well, statistics show that majority of HR people are women. So now imagine workplace made exclusively of men. Or imagine workplace made exclusively of women. You know, can you imagine? Or one color workplace. First, such a work environment would seem a little politically incorrect, but I personally think that it's also unhealthy because it would not reflect the diversity in our world. And I think workplaces need to do that. They need to reflect our world in order to understand it. So we live in an ever-changing world, and sometimes the pace is a little fast, but as in many other areas, embracing the change is really the key to success. In the world, also changes have happened in the last 50 years, and I can mention the UN Convention on People with Disabilities. That is an international treaty, an international legal document to protect the rights of people with disabilities. In the US, we have the American Disability Act. That's closer to home, and companies need to be aware of this essential legislative document, if only to protect themselves from expensive lawsuits about discriminating against employees with disabilities. So I would urge all companies to be aware of ADA, but I would also add that that should not discourage companies to hire people with disabilities, because they can form the most loyal, most devoted group of employees in the company. So the next slide, I think, is my last one about embracing the change and about how do we go from struggle to strength. So the picture you see is of Mrs. Lee, that was our main caregiver in Beijing, China, and you can see her holding Nicholas. Nicholas is 25 now, and he must have been 7 or 8 in this picture. And Mrs. Lee's love for Nicholas, I love this picture because her love for my son shines, and she, over the years, become the other, I like to call her Nicholas' second mother. And I think every mother needs a second mother for their kids. So in conclusion, I often wondered what is the purpose of having people with disabilities in our midst, if anyone would ask that question. In China, I remember Mrs. Lee, one day she was walking with our son in the streets of Beijing, and then she came home with tears in her eyes, and I said, what's the matter, Mrs. Lee? What happened? And she was crying, and she says, oh, I'm so sad because there was this man walking in the street, and he saw me with Nicholas, and he asked me, what was the purpose of doing this? What was the purpose of caring for someone with disabilities? He told her that this was a waste of time and waste of energy. And she got angry, and of course she got also sad, and I don't know what she told him, but when she came home, she was crying. And so sometimes I ask myself, and I think the best answer I can come up with, the one I am most comfortable with, is the following. Having people with diverse abilities among us, so-called typical or normal people, is that they make our communities more caring, more inclusive, and that is good for everyone, as this in turn make us better people with greater empathy. Our world needs empathy. Now, people with disabilities, and there may be some listening to me here, people with disabilities do not want others to feel sorry for them because they do bring value to the community table. So I think what people with disabilities or with diverse abilities really want is to be treated equally and just be accommodated with those disabilities that they were either born with or that they cannot do anything about. And I think our work community can do that, and it is a small price to pay to have devoted, loyal, and productive employees. So this is the end of my formal presentation. I will welcome questions from our listeners.
Great, Rochelle. Thank you so much for all of your insights and your stories. We appreciate that. So feel free to submit any questions. For those of you who haven't submitted anything yet, you can do that via the questions function. We do have a couple questions here, Rochelle, so far. The first one, are there any specific organizations or maybe websites that families can go to for tips, tools, resources, anything that specific websites or organizations that these HR folks on the line today might be able to give just off the top of your head, maybe ones that you've used?
There are, I just need to mention that I'm doing another webinar next week on the 30th of April, and that webinar will be more specific to tools and resources for families. From the top of my head, there are multiple websites regarding special needs, but there's a specific one that comes to my mind for companies, and that is there is this newsletter called The Wave that comes, I think, quarterly, and so you can Google that, and it is a very good newsletter that specifically wants to help companies around the American Disability Act, around issues, how they can accommodate employees with disabilities, and other topics.
Great. And yes, so for the HR folks on the phone, anybody who is enrolled in Care.com will get our regular Care.com newsletter, which will have the webinar that Rochelle just spoke of on the 30th. So encourage them to sign up for that. I can also get you that information if you're interested in having them attend that webinar. All right, the next question. If there was like one tip that you could give a working mom or working family who's caring with a child for special needs, what is that #1 thing that you would recommend to them?
That's a really tough one because, of course, when you care for someone with disabilities, you have all those #1 tips, right? But if I have to really choose one, I would say take care of yourself, because as a mom, as a working mom, you are the most important person in your child's life. And so I used to tell myself that Nicholas needed me to be happy, healthy, and sound. Sound of body, sound of mind, in order for me to provide the best care available for him. And I know sometimes it sounds a little bit paradoxical, like, okay, here's my son with special needs, and why do I need to take care of me? But actually, I have practiced this for 20 years, and it really works. You first have to take care of you. And a big part of that taking care of you is finding help so that you can take care of you, and then you can take care of your child. If your child needs lots of your time to go to medical appointments, go to school meetings, that means you have to find help. You probably have to find help to do the vacuum cleaning or the shopping. So I don't know if that answers that question, but because, as I said, it's really hard to find the top one. And for me, the top one is taking care of me so that I can take care of my child.
Great. Another question. Do you have a specific example of a time that an HR department was maybe particularly helpful, or on the flip side, particularly unhelpful, something that you were kind of surprised that they didn't have the information or resources?
Yeah, okay, to the first question, particularly helpful, as I mentioned before, now don't repeat this, because United Nations, which was our organization, United Nations is a humanitarian organization, so one would think that they would be open to helping, and they did. They had it in their policy. They had special provisions that the HR people didn't really know because it was so rare. As we said, 15% of the general population will have special needs. Very few of those special needs families will travel like we did. And so, as I said, I had mentioned this to other people. I believe we are the only North American family who traveled so widely for 17 years. Nicholas was 17 when we moved back to Canada. And when I was asking my husband, he was a staff member, I was a training spouse, I said there must be something to help us because Nicholas needed help and it all cost money, and I found that was unfair that we had to pay all of it from out of pocket. And so soon enough, we asked, and then, yes, they looked into special needs provisions, and they did have special sections that will accommodate families who care for a family member with special needs. but they did not make that information readily available. I think after us, we were kind of pioneer in this field, and so after us, they made it much more available because we complained loud that this was really not acceptable and put a lot of stress on our family that could have been avoided. And so I would suggest to HR professionals listening to me that even if only a very small minority of employees will care for someone with disabilities or will have disabilities, I would say just as a matter of policy, do put all information applicable to people with special needs in every package you give out to new employees.
Great, Rochelle. I really appreciate that. So I think we are ready to wrap up. I want to thank you all for attending today. A few things before we close. If you have any specific questions and want to learn about special needs care and how you can partner with Care.com to support your work-life initiatives, please feel free to contact us at the email that's on the screen. It's workplacesolutions@care.com. Once again, thank you, Rochelle, so much for all of your insights and your stories today. We certainly appreciate that. And we do ask that you fill, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you, Justin.
Thank you. And we do ask that you fill out our survey, which will help us provide you with new topics and things that are interesting and relevant to you. So please do fill out that survey as well. Once again, thank you so much for attending today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to me. Have a good day.